Today's episode is posting 3 days before Halloween, Amy. Did you know that before I cackled?
No.
Good. I was hoping to surprise you. See, guys, if I scare her just a little bit too much, I could just make that baby fall right out of her because she's ready to pop.
It's very true.
We are nearing the end of season 2 here, folks, because this woman is going to squeeze out a baby before you know it. So yeah, let's get into the semi but not really Halloween themed episode, which is underappreciated vitamins.
I feel like it's very much not Halloween themed, but I will say, like, I don't know, labor is a little wild.
Or would you say that it is concerning or scary how much people underappreciate these nutrients? Does it scare you as a dietitian?
Wow, that is a very nice way to spin it. I agree. I am very alarmed that no one appreciates these nutrients, and it is scary.
There you go.
Yes.
See? Halloween theme, baby. So
we are really spinning this thing.
We are. I mean, we're grasping for sure, but people should be used to this on this podcast by this point. We're almost 200 episodes deep. People know us by now. But where do we want to start? Oh, dietitian friend of mine. You had a little unrelated nugget to share potentially about the internet and how it's the wild, wild west. Do you want to open with that as a quick side?
We were talking before I got on. Actually, no, we were texting and I said, isn't this email wild that I received? Because the email was like a newsletter that was being sent. And the email was titled, "Your normal blood pressure is silently destroying your brain." And I'm just like, whoa, what a title to scare the bejesus out of people that might already have a degree of health anxiety.
Clickbait.
Yeah, very clickbaity. But normal is in quotes. And I was like, wow, what an intense title. So your normal blood pressure is silently destroying your brain. So let that sink in. So I then clicked on it and was like, oh, this will be interesting. And of course, they're not even talking about normal blood pressure or like ideal blood pressure. They're talking about blood pressure in like the 135, 140 range. And I'm like, well, that's not normal. Which again, they sort of said in the article that some doctors might claim it's normal, but I don't know. I don't think a good doctor would claim it was normal. But it's just kind of a wild
clickbait.
It was clickbaity, and I clicked. I mean, just to check out what this article was about. But yeah, it was a little intense.
But it goes back to what we've talked about on this podcast, right? That the internet, and maybe even broader than that, like books, magazines, tabloids, but so many people are trying to scare you because fear makes you take action, and fear makes you more compliant, and fear makes you spend money. So if they can get you to purchase the tabloid, click on the email, buy the supplement, buy the test, do the protocol, whatever, fear is a tool to get you to spend a lot of money. And it's everywhere you look.
It's true.
It's
that's scary.
Lurking around every corner. I think we both figured that out at the same time. Like, oh, how scary is that? But it's apropos as we near the end of season 2, and realistically, we're going to be on hiatus for a little while because Amy needs maternity leave and she needs time to like bond with and care for her new baby. So yeah, just throw her in a cage, baby cage. But like we're going to be taking a little break, and we're not going to be a weekly recurring thing in your life for a little while. Viewership of ours. And so it's like, we don't want you filling that void with a bunch of horseradish like this that's just going to scare you and make you take less intelligent action, shall we say. So be aware, keep your wits about you. Don't trust anybody on the internet aside from Amy and I. I don't know what to tell you. And go follow my YouTube channel, Gut Microbiome Queen, because I'll still be posting because I am not having a baby. So there we go.
Well, I also feel like generally you can kind of sense how you're operating after reading something like that or hearing different information. I think building some awareness around how you're operating. Are you operating in a state of fear, or are you operating just like from a rational brain to a degree? Because again, a lot of fear preys on us because it again leads us to be put more into this like urgent state that oftentimes makes us make worse decisions to a degree. And go ahead. I was just gonna say, and I personally kind of know if I'm falling into that, but it's taken time to sort of figure it out. But a lot of times it comes on as like a very urgent energy, and compulsive, that kind of thing.
You're tiptoeing around what I was going to say anyway, which is like a lot of this happens on autopilot and without our conscious permission.
Right.
So if you notice that you read a headline like that and you automatically go to this place of, oh my God, and fear, observe that and start to have the self-awareness and kind of have those moments where you step out of your current experience and go, oh, wait, I see what's happening here. Is that fear response necessary or correct? And if it is the degree of the fear response appropriate for what I'm looking at, right? Like if somebody comes running at you with a knife, you have full permission to be in like 10 out of 10 fight or flight mode. But if you read a clickbaity email title like this and you go into 9 or 10 out of 10 fight or flight response, like observe that. There's a disconnect there. Like the degree of the perceived threat does not match the degree of the response. Oftentimes, and again, it's happening without our conscious choosing of that. So if you could develop that self-awareness and realize when that happens, that's the first step oftentimes.
Well, and you can choose like how you respond and behave, because like sometimes our brains get locked into like whatever our core fear is. So if your core fear is health stuff, you could be triggered 10 out of 10 by something like this article. And it's like, okay, you can take that information from your brain and decide how you're going to use it. You can sort of like get sucked in to that as like, ooh, this is dangerous. I need to pay attention and I need to like really read up on this, that sort of thing. Or again, can you also compartmentalize of like, oh, I don't necessarily need to dig into this. This is sort of like activating my fear. I can kind of go a different direction and follow through with the plan that I already have established for my health stuff. I don't necessarily need more information or more. I already have a plan to a degree. I think that's sometimes when people work with us, it's like they already have somewhat of a plan, or like they're working with someone and then they're getting all this information. And it's like, ooh, they can be thrown a million different directions and then they never follow through with the plan that was laid out. And that's where like all that information can be really tricky because it does prey on your fear. Yeah. And it takes kind of resilience to be able to choose a different behavior based on that reaction that you're having.
Yeah. Well, I think that was a lovely opening segment for the Halloween theme part of today's episode. Also, I'm going to throw something else out there. You made this more Halloween themed than you're realizing, by the way.
With my shirt?
Yes. Show the good people your shirt. It has a ghost on it. For those of you who are listening, not watching. So that concludes the Halloween part of today's show.
Basically one of the few t-shirts that can fit me at this point. So I don't know if it was really on purpose because I didn't know this was going to be Halloween themed, but
that's right. We're going to give you credit where credit is due.
Thank you.
But let's get into your realm of expertise, my darling, my friend. Yes. Let's talk about some nutrients that people could be paying more attention to. I was thinking we could open with vitamin E.
Yeah.
Something that you could probably speak to more than me, because I confessed in the last episode that even I have been underappreciating vitamin E.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think when it comes to vitamin D, like it is, again, going to be an antioxidant. So it's going to help like regulate inflammation in the body. So its role to potentially reduce inflammation in the gut is something that you see in some of the studies. The thing that vitamin E does, I don't know, like, this gets pretty sciencey, but it reduces like oxidative stress, which is essentially, again, like there are these compounds that are made when metabolism happens, like normal metabolism. Normal metabolites get created that are more inflammatory, and vitamin E can sort of take those and help
neutralize them.
Yeah, neutralize them. That's the word I'm looking for. Helps to neutralize like these inflammatory metabolites. And that really can, again, help regulate overall inflammation in the body. And I think when it comes to gut stuff...
can I pause you for a quick
yeah.
sec? Sorry.
Yeah.
I just wanted to throw this in there when you were talking about like a normal consequence of metabolism is some more inflammatory reactive oxygen species, and vitamin E can neutralize that. A great quote that I remember from an herbal medicine conference a few years ago was somebody said, and I wish I remembered who to quote here, but they said that inflammation is the cost of doing business in an oxygen-rich world.
Yeah.
And I thought, that actually was pretty eloquently said. And it's right. Like, our metabolism and our utilization of oxygen to make ATP comes at a cost, and we make some reactive oxygen species, and that's normal. That's fine. But that's why it's important to have these antioxidants in our diet, like vitamin E and vitamin C, because we can kind of quench that as it's created. And then you get to have all the nice ATP without a whole bunch of inflammation.
Yeah, this one, vitamin E in particular, too, because like you said, it can help sort of reduce oxygen, too, which again, like
in the gut,
reactive oxygen species. Yeah, similar to like vitamin C does this. So it can help reduce like some of these inflammatory particles in the gut. And basically what happens is you get less oxygen in the gut, which is a good thing from a gut standpoint. Like if you have more uncontrolled inflammation in the gut, you're likely going to have more of these like reactive oxygen species and oxygen being produced in the gut. So again, having enough vitamin D helps to regulate inflammation and immune function at the gut barrier. So again, it's going to modify the environment in a way that helps good microbes grow. So there is evidence too that, again, vitamin E is going to regulate microbes, and likely due to a lot of the anti-inflammatory effects that it has in the gut, and sort of lowering of oxygen in the gut. And I think we're going to talk about riboflavin, but that does this very similar thing too. Like riboflavin, vitamin C, and vitamin E kind of do similar stuff from a gut standpoint, by sort of potentially help regulating the amount of oxygen and like inflammation in the gut.
Go
ahead.
It's like so much in the body that things are regulated in a compartment-specific fashion. So, for example, the pH of your blood is going to be very different from the pH of your stomach versus the pH of your cerebrospinal fluid versus the pH of your vaginal tract versus the pH of your colon. You get the idea. And it's not like acid bad, alkaline good, like we sometimes are taught with the alkaline diet world. No, you want the appropriate pH in each individual compartment, and you want your body to be highly skilled at regulating that. And I feel like similarly, in most of the rest of the body, having a lot of oxygen is a great thing. But in the gut environment, specifically, you actually don't want a lot of oxygen. And that allows aerobic bacteria to grow, things that are oftentimes pathobionts or pathogens.
Right.
That, like E. coli. E. coli can grow in an abundance with oxygen around versus something like Akkermansia that is not oxygen tolerant and it'll die if there's too much oxygen. So we start to shift that balance towards more dysbiosis and overgrowth of bad stuff if there's too much oxygen in the gut. And you know what, as a quick side note, I have wondered for a really long time, and I don't think I've seen any research to really support this idea. I am very leery of magnesium oxide based supplements for this reason. Like, I don't want to intentionally ingest oxygen containing molecule. Maybe it's a moot point because I mean, water has oxygen in it. So maybe I'm just making a mountain out of a molehill. But I feel like I have not opted for that form of magnesium because of this concern. If I have a choice, I'm going to reach for magnesium citrate or, magnesium glycinate instead.
Right.
But it's because too much oxygen in the gut is actually a bad thing.
Yeah, I agree. It would be like taking an animal, like a healthy, if you imagine like a penguin is equivalent to a healthy probiotic microbe or something, and you drop that into Florida. It's like, oh, that penguin's not going to be able to survive that environment. Similarly to like different microbes in the gut, like they all have specific environments that they're going to grow in, and it can be really slight shifts too. I know like with PPIs, because they shift the pH, like you're describing, of the stomach, when they look at the pH it shifts the pH of the small intestines too, downstream. And again, that slight shift can definitely lead to dysbiosis, but it's not like you're going from, a really crazy shift, but even like slight shifts can really kind of make your gut a little bit more prone to different types of microbial growth, and then it's going to inhibit other microbial growth, a lot of the good microbes. So yeah, I think people underestimate how like some of those environmental factors dictate the growth of microbes,
and how much basic stuff like vitamin E can help with it. Again, like, here's this vitamin. I mean, everybody and their damn brother loves vitamin D, and we all know about, the importance of taking vitamin D. Everybody and their brother cares about iron and B12 and folate, and those are great, cool nutrients, and you should all really care about them. But our point here is that all of the nutrients matter, and all of the vitamins in today's episode matter. And these are some of the ones that really get lost in the conversation when we hyper focus on a subset of a few vitamins.
Yeah. Well, and I would say too, again, I know last time we talked about Diana Rogers posted a study, and she had listed like 67% of the people in the study had deficient intakes in vitamin E. But I think like I seem higher than that with my patients. I don't know for you. I struggle with vitamin E when I look at my diet. It's like one of the few that I struggle with a little bit more.
Yeah, I do too. And I mean, yeah, you said, what was it, 67%?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I referenced this last time too, but in the Nutrivore book, Sarah Ballantyne references an article here, and they estimated 96.2% prevalence of nutrient insufficiencies, not deficiencies though. So this is like, oh, you're just not quite eating enough, but maybe it's not enough to cause overt disease and symptoms yet. It's just suboptimal. But, 96.2% chance that this conversation is relevant for whoever's listening to us right now. Like, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And I'll throw this out there. I bet that it is higher in the IBS population. You know why? A lot of these people are cutting out gluten, myself included, and wheat germ is one of the better sources of vitamin E in the diet. So a lot of people like myself probably hacked out gluten without a single thought, not a single neuron firing off thinking about vitamin E as a consequence of that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I think, again, like, it's funny. I had a patient one time who was trying to get vitamin E, and she was she like really liked toying around with Chronometer. Like she found it really interesting. And I think she stumbled across like a Chris Masterjohn vitamin E thing. And one of his sources he had listed, she was really funny. She was like, it's like bird food or something. I ordered it. Like she ordered it. And I'm like, oh, why don't you just try to eat more like sunflower seeds? Like you're good. You don't necessarily have to go to like eating the bird food level.
Yeah.
That might be like the peak form of vitamin E. But yeah, vitamin E, again, it is one that I frequently talk about with patients. And again, I think it's really interesting that it's low. And I think, again, most of our patients have more than one of these deficiencies too. So it's like the synergy of multiple deficiencies at one time, we don't really understand either. And it's, again, it would probably be almost impossible to study the synergistic effects of being kind of depleted across the board.
I can't imagine doing that kind of a study. But again, it's like, do you need that study?
Right.
To prove that vitamin E is important or like all of these vitamins and minerals are important. I personally don't think so. But yeah, a lot of people, it's like they're not going to listen unless they read a specific research article or they see somebody in a Facebook forum with their exact symptoms, their exact diagnosis. And they're like, oh my God, the one thing that cured me was vitamin E, baby. Like,
yeah. Well, and I know there was an interesting study too that I found with vitamin E. It's a fish study. So again, like it's not a human study, but still kind of pretty fascinating. I believe what they did, because I looked at this before we recorded last week. So it's not totally top of mind, but I believe what they did is they fed the fish like vitamin E rich, I want to say kibble, but I don't know if that's not the right word. Fish food.
Chow? I don't know.
Right. Chow. And then like chow that didn't really have vitamin E in it. So like deficient in vitamin E. And what they found was one, the fish that had more vitamin E had more digestive enzymes than the fish that didn't. They had higher intestinal fold height, so like thicker intestinal folds. They had better like mucosal, like again, better mucus layer. And again, their microbes look totally different, which is just kind of wild because they've isolated one nutrient, right? And it's probably an extreme example because like rarely is someone not eating any vitamin E in their diet. You know, it's sort of they're doing
AIP maybe.
Yeah.
Right? You cut out all nuts and seeds and wheat. I don't know what's left after that.
Could be getting like 20% of your vitamin E or something like that, which is basically nothing. But again, it provides an extreme look, which again was really fascinating because you're like, ooh, if this one nutrient can do this, like, and you're deficient in it, and you're also deficient in calcium or something we talked about last time, and a few other ones, it's like, oh man, like this could really add up fast to how it could affect the gut.
Yeah, for sure. And again, we have no real way of understanding how these nutrient deficiencies and insufficiencies are interacting with each other. And then heaven forbid you have like a little bit of a candida on top of that, or a bit of stress, or like shitty sleep. You know, there's other variables at play too. And again, it's like, I just hope that we're making the case in this episode that these vitamins and these nutrients matter. And I hope that people take a peek at Chronometer or take a peek at the labels of the foods that they're eating and try to understand where they can get more of this nutrient, because it's a big deal. And even like, here's another layer too. Vitamin E, maybe because of its antioxidant role, is important for immune function and immune health.
Yeah.
And that I think is a really underappreciated sector in the gut microbiome, dysbiosis, SIBO kind of world. Like everybody wants to talk about the microbe and how to annihilate it and kill it and eradicate it. Not as many people want to talk about, oh, well, what if I had a healthy immune system and my immune system was able to help me manage and conquer these microbes?
Right.
And again, like vitamin E supplementation has been shown to reduce the incidence of upper respiratory tract infections like colds.
Right.
So it stands to reason that vitamin E is going to do something beneficial for the immune cells that live in and around your gut. And that might translate to a better handle on your microbiome.
Yeah. Because again, like if thinking about it from like an IBS standpoint, you have in IBS more like localized inflammation going on in the gut. So anything that can kind of regulate immune function and inflammation in the gut too, I think is going to be beneficial from an environmental factor. We were talking about pH, we were talking about oxygen, we were talking about like you're saying, immune function. Like all those things are environmental factors that dictate and that can help control and modulate the microbiome. The microbiome could play a role the opposite direction too, but like you can't just ignore the fundamental pieces that are going to help kind of regulate the environment better.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Would you say this is a good time to segue over to our next nutrient, since we want to cram a few in this episode? Let's talk a bit about riboflavin, vitamin B2. I have a couple of little quotes pulled up from research articles and like how I teach this in FODMAP Freedom. So if I may on that.
Yeah, for sure.
So for example, in this article, they talk about how vitamin B2 is associated with reactive oxygen species in immune cells. And so, okay, I know that we just said moments ago that reactive oxygen species are generally like inflammatory byproducts of our metabolism. And generally speaking, you want to neutralize them, and that would have an anti-inflammatory effect. However, reactive oxygen species are actually one of the ways that your immune system works and how your immune system kills microbes. So you intentionally create reactive oxygen species, and then we let that inflammation destroy the microbe instead of us. So in this paper, they're talking about how vitamin B2 is involved in the regulation of reactive oxygen species generation in immune cells, and ROS are important effectors and signaling molecules for inflammation and immunity. They also make a point of saying that all bacteria need riboflavin and riboflavin-dependent enzymes to promote their growth and survival. So, if we have a deficiency, Lord knows what it's going to do to our immune system, and Lord knows what it's going to do to our microbiome. If all bacteria and all human cells need this nutrient to survive.
Yeah.
And there's like a couple hundred enzymes that are dependent on riboflavin or niacin or both.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes me think of like, you know, when people first learn about magnesium and their mind is blown and they're like, whoa, I had no idea. What is the thing that everybody always says when they first learn about magnesium and why it matters?
Now you're stumping me.
It's needed for 400
300
chemical reactions in the human body, right? Or whatever the number is. But that's always like the thing that they tell people, like, you're never going to believe this, Ma.
Right.
I just learned magnesium is super important. Well, and that's true, but you could say the exact same thing about riboflavin and niacin.
Right.
You need those two B vitamins for like 300 or 400 chemical reactions and enzymes in the body. Like, why are we caring about magnesium for that reason, but we're not paying attention to riboflavin and niacin?
Well, and I think like the B1, B2, so like thiamine, riboflavin, and niacin, again, are needed for a lot of energy metabolism. So like how your body actually produces energy is dependent on a lot of those three, again, like heavily dependent on those three micronutrients. So like if you're low in those, again, if your body and your cells don't have energy, like that's something that we can't even comprehend how that affects the body in so many different ways. So yeah, it's crazy. And I think the more you look at any nutrient, your mind's going to be blown most of the time. But some nutrients, again, get a lot more press, like the magnesium, than riboflavin.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I don't know if hypocritical is quite the word I'm looking for.
I feel like it's very
silly.
It's very, to me, indicative maybe of like what this sounds weird to say, like, but what Big Pharma does, where it's like, we're going to find the one thing that's going to help change your health around. And so here, throw a magnesium in. And again, maybe it does help with your sleep or something, like, which would be great, whatever. But I think it's indicative of that. Like, there's so much selling of wellness and selling of health and trying to boil it down to like the one it factor. When again, the synergy of having optimal nutrition is not a really sexy thing that you can sell. So to me, it boils down to probably people just trying to sell stuff.
Yeah. Well, and again, like the internet and the world in general is riddled with that. Like everybody is selling something and they're all too happy to sell it to you. And I mean, to be clear, like we both are business people and people learn about us and our services through this podcast or our other independent channels, but it's different. Like I would rather create value and help as many people as I can here on my free platforms. And then the people who need the extra help and they need that extra like hand holding, then they can kind of organically come to me.
Right.
And I think that's different and frankly more ethical than a lot of what you see, like the fear mongering. Your normal blood pressure is silently destroying your brain. Like, whoa, holy crap. But to go back to your point about synergy and how a lot of people have numerous deficiencies or insufficiencies, and that is this huge wild card. Riboflavin interacts with some other nutrients in a big way. And I thought I would make this point, and I have to cite, I actually pulled up the Nutrivore website and I went to her page on vitamin B2. So if you want to read a little bit more about this, she has it on there, but credit where credit is due. But so for example, she has in here that riboflavin deficiency can decrease the conversion process and basically increase your risk for niacin deficiency because you need to use riboflavin to convert NAD and NADP, which are niacin based enzymes. So if you have a riboflavin deficiency, well, now you might be a little bit more prone to a niacin deficiency. Similarly, I didn't realize this. She wrote here, riboflavin could also alter iron metabolism, likely by reducing iron absorption, impacting iron utilization for hemoglobin synthesis, or increasing the loss of iron in the intestines. Whoa. Here's everybody talking about iron and focusing all day, every day on iron, but humble old riboflavin might be a pretty big deal. And then there's one more I'll mention really quick, which is similarly, everybody and their brother, especially 10 years ago, cared very, 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 very deeply about one little enzyme called MTHFR. And what was the response, right? Like everybody ran out and bought a methylated folate supplement.
Right.
And oh, I can't convert and I just would keel over dead without this methylfolate supplement. This is the answer to all of my problems. Well, Chris Masterjohn had a really great video on YouTube. I think it was literally titled, Your MTHFR SNP is just a riboflavin deficiency. I think that was the title of it. And he makes the point of saying, hey, if you pause all of the MTHFR frantic madness and you stop to think for a second about what exactly does it mean when I have a SNP in this pathway?
Right.
The way that the SNP is deleterious to your health is that it makes your MTHFR enzyme a little bit less able to bind with its cofactor, riboflavin. And there actually were some studies that he cited in the video where they made sure that the people were getting enough riboflavin. I don't remember if it was food or supplement or both, but they basically just loaded the people up with plenty of riboflavin, and all of the deleterious effects of the dreaded MTHFR SNP went bye-bye.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
MTHFR doesn't matter as long as you get enough freaking riboflavin.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think again, like, there's some gut stuff with riboflavin too. There's a really good article we should link to that's kind of an overview too of just different nutrients and like how they affect the microbiome and gut health. I'll have to send it to you.
Yeah, do.
because I know they talk about riboflavin. I think they talk about vitamin E in there. It's sort of a really nice overview. I'll send it to you. It was helpful in writing my book to kind of like see where they were pulling articles and get a little bit more detailed into that. But yeah, they talk about, again, like the antioxidant factor with riboflavin. Vitamin C does this too, where again, riboflavin appears to lower the oxygen in the gut as well, which then is associated to different microbial changes. So this is with supplementation. So like heavier supplementation has been shown to increase Faecalibacterium praenicii, has been shown to increase Rosburgia, like some of the good probiotic bacteria, and decrease E. coli. So there was some really nice changes to the microbiome that happens with riboflavin supplementation. And I don't necessarily think that that's indicative that you need to run out and supplement with riboflavin, but it's just showing you that, riboflavin does do different things gut-wise that could potentially affect the microbiome. Another thing I'll mention about riboflavin and also vitamin E too is, and this could be because they have some antioxidant properties to them, but they help with histamine. So vitamin E seems to help stabilize mast cells. And riboflavin again helps with histamine. So, if you have histamine and it's like you're manipulating your diet, but then your diet's deficient in vitamin E and vitamin B2, you could be making matters worse from an overall histamine tolerance standpoint. So I just wanted to throw that out there too.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was one of my favorite like mic drop moments in FODMAP Freedom. At some point in the histamine module, I point out all of the different vitamins and minerals that you need in order to make histamine degrading enzymes. Right. And it's kind of my point on the one of several points in the program where I'm like, see, I told you so. These matter.
Right.
I assure you. I'm not making it up. But yeah, riboflavin, you're right, does have an antihistamine kind of effect. It doesn't surprise me that vitamin E would stabilize mast cells because, again, like mast cells are going to have inflammation and reactive oxygen species too. So why the heck not? Yeah, it's a humble nutrient that a lot of people are at least coming up a little bit short on. And some people, I think, would benefit from extra. So, for example, I don't know if you're aware, but there's some studies in humans with migraine, and they give them really high doses of riboflavin. I forget what it is off the top of my head, but it's like well above and beyond what would seem practical. And it seems to help decrease the incidence or the severity of migraine. And I've actually done this with people for a few years now. If I have somebody with a history of migraine, or I've even done this with some cases of like cyclic vomiting syndrome or abdominal migraine, where it's kind of in like that related family of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's close enough related to migraine that I feel like it would be appropriate. It's really safe and well tolerated to at least do a trial run of a higher dose riboflavin supplement for like a month or two. And the handful of times that I've done this with people, it seems like it has helped. So, and again, it's like pretty cheap and pretty safe to try.
Right.
But I wonder how much of it is because of the histamine thing, because a lot of migraine sufferers have a histamine sort of component to their case.
Right.
How much of it is a microbiome thing? How much of it is an inflammation thing, an ATP thing? I'm curious, but it really doesn't matter. The point is, every human being needs riboflavin. Some people might be really, really deficient and need more. So I hope that people care about this nutrient.
Yeah, for sure. Faux show.
Shall we go on to riboflavin's BFF forever? Do you want to reveal who the BFF is?
Riboflavin's BFF forever? What are you
Don't
tell
you
me?
think?
You tell me.
I was going to say niacin.
Oh, yeah.
Don't you feel like they'd be friends?
I feel like, honestly, the first three B vitamins, so like B1, B2, B3, to me, again, because of their importance in like energy metabolism.
Even. I'll throw B5 in there a little bit as well.
Yeah, I think, again, like a lot of those are going to have a huge impact on like energy metabolism and things like that, and like how we make energy in the body. So to me, like, though they're tightly linked in that way, but
they're all like this. They're
right.
all besties.
Best buddies.
Yeah. And again, to harken back to the riboflavin conversation, niacin also is needed for like 400 chemical reactions in the body.
Right.
So everybody
Magnesium is like not that special.
It's not, honestly. I mean, to be clear, we're not telling you to shirk on magnesium and like stop consuming magnesium, because magnesium is important too. But the point is, magnesium is not the only nutrient that matters. And, you know, honestly, I'm going to take a 30-second tangent here. I know it's overwhelming, right? Like, the reality is people have lives and commitments and families and jobs, and they're exhausted and they just want to feel better. So it's so appealing to think that there's like one magical nutrient to heal them all. But the reality of nutrition and human existence is that there are many different nutrients that you need to consume on a regular basis. And that's just how it works.
Right.
And this is, for all that you might be feeling overwhelmed by this now, thinking, oh crap, I have to read about friggin' niacin now. It's not our fault. Don't shoot the messenger. Yeah. It's more of like, the system has failed you. The fact that we, at least here in the United States, do not teach people how to eat healthfully and how to take care of their bodies is an absolute crying shame. The fact that people make it not only through middle school, high school, and even college, and they make it into their adult life, and they don't know what foods contain vitamins and which foods are healthy and which foods are not, is like insane to me. So there are a lot of adults, the majority of adults, I would even argue, walking around right now, and they don't know anything about niacin and riboflavin and vitamin E beyond what like a tabloid might tell them. So, but just because you missed out on that education growing up doesn't mean that you have permission to ignore this information now. Like, you need to realize the hole in that education and work hard as an adult to fill that void so that you can come out the other side of whatever struggle you're in right now, understanding how to care for your body and how to nourish yourself properly.
Yeah. And I don't even necessarily think that people need to know all the ins and outs of each of these nutrients. I think from my standpoint, they need to understand the concept that you need to be nourished in order to be healthy, and looking into some of these things and seeing like where you might have deficits is going to play a huge role in your health. Now, again, it might not be immediate, which is, I think, usually also the harder part to wrap your head around. Like if you change your diet or something like that, or fix a deficiency, it might take time to like see results, but just kind of having a true appreciation that like this is going to affect so many different systems and so many different things in the body, and maybe you don't understand every mechanism or everything, but just having the mentality of, ooh, I need to be nourished to be healthy. And then I think in the gut health space, I need to be nourished to help my gut brain axis function. I think like that's like the clearest message that I try to emphasize with my patients, that I think they get, because they like the gut brain axis is something that's like they understand the importance of that. Right. Yeah. But they don't necessarily link that to nutrition. Mm-hmm. And I think the more you make that link, the more you're going to have long-term relief from gut symptoms. And the better long-term strategy you're going to have. If you don't make that link, you're usually stuck on restrictive diets and kind of like like things that might help symptoms a little bit, but aren't necessarily going to push the needle long-term. So yeah.
Well, it's the reality of so much of our work, honestly, is that we have given away the farm so many times on this podcast, right? Like we have told people the exact things that they need to work on in order to feel better. But I feel like the bulk of what we end up doing on this podcast is trying to justify the why.
Right.
Because so many people are skeptical. Like, oh, vitamin E is not important. I'm a special advanced case. Nobody's ever been sicker than me. I can't possibly just be a vitamin E deficiency. No, I need a new antimicrobial. No. And they're so stuck in that frame that they're familiar with that it's like, we're giving them all the answers for free here on this platform.
Right.
And then so much of our conversation is just fleshing out the why and the science and the justification for, no, please, for the love of God, listen to us.
Right.
But like, even without this episode, if people had just listened to us umpteen episodes ago, downloaded Chronometer, looked for nutritional holes, and then worked on adding foods to fill those nutritional holes on Chronometer, they wouldn't even have to listen to this conversation. But the point is, people people underappreciate certain nutrients. And this is one of a myriad of reasons why people could still be stuck. But you don't need to listen to this episode to take action on what we've already taught you. That's the kind of ironic thing about this.
Right.
Anyhow, going back to niacin, riboflavin's BFF forever. Here's a quiz for you, dietitian friend of mine. Are you ready? What are the 4 Ds of pellagra?
Oh, goodness.
I have it Googled if you want me to just say it.
Just say it.
I didn't remember either, so I Googled it. But one of them is very relevant for our listenership. Okay. You ready? Diarrhea, dermatitis, dementia, and death. Obviously, the last one is like, if it gets bad enough, everybody calm down, you're fine. But the first one, diarrhea and dermatitis, also fairly relevant for a majority of our listenership, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure.
It's kind of a big deal. And, to pull up some other references that I had handy from FODMAP Freedom, a couple other things about niacin. Again, it's very involved in energy metabolism. So think of things like fatigue and brain fog and overall cellular health. And it's needed for about 400 chemical reactions in the body, kind of like magnesium and riboflavin and probably everything else. But vitamin B3 inhibits the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines, IL-1, IL-6, and tumor necrosis factor alpha. Isn't that interesting? And then how many people are walking around saying that they have inflammation and they don't know why? A lot. A lot of people. So what if this humble B vitamin that everybody forgets about could be one of the reasons for that?
And I do think there has been some evidence that it does help with intestinal inflammation too, like specifically. So
that's the diarrhea thing, probably.
Right. So crazy.
Sorry, we kept interrupting each other for about 5 minutes there, but I was just going to throw out another article that I cite in FODMAP Freedom said a niacin deficiency results in intestinal inflammation and diarrhea. Niacin also exhibits potent antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties and acts as a modulator of intestinal barrier function and bacterial endotoxin production. Dun, dun, dun. So, okay, you've got intestinal inflammation, diarrhea, leaky gut, and endotoxemia. How many of our people care about at least one, if not all 4 of those things? Pretty much everyone, right?
Right. It's true.
Kind of a big deal. Kind of a big deal.
I feel like I'm kind of a big deal now, but just physically.
You've always been a big deal in my mind.
Okay, thank you.
But now you're physically and metaphorically a big deal.
Yes.
How about that?
True.
Oh, goodness gracious. So people care about niacin. That's the executive summary there. I don't know. Do you have anything to add on niacin, or shall we move on to maybe one more? Hurrah.
Yeah. I don't know if we were going to do like copper. I can't remember what we had on the docket.
We had said when we were planning this episode last week, we had said vitamin C, perhaps. And that way I could title it Underappreciated Vitamins and kind of keep it on theme.
Okay. Let me see. I have that, I think, in my book too. Let me pull up that part of my book.
You go ahead and do that, and I'll make mention. So this one might surprise people that it's on this list because actually a lot of people care about vitamin C, but not for a complete set of reasons. That's the point we're going to make here. So a lot of people think about vitamin C and it's like this knee-jerk reaction. I say vitamin C, you say colds and flus. I say vitamin C, you say histamine and allergies. And outside of that realm, really people don't care about this nutrient all that much. But like you had said before, vitamin C is an antioxidant and it can kind of help recycle or recharge vitamin E. So once you burn through your vitamin E and use it up as an antioxidant, vitamin C comes along and helps it out and recharges it. So that's kind of neat. They work together. And again, I'm going to give credit where credit is due while you look up this part of your book. But the Nutrivore site has a really interesting segment in the vitamin C page about vitamin C and mental health. And she cites there's a study, in a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial for 14 days, 120 young, healthy adults were given sustained-release ascorbic acid or placebo after being subjected to acute psychological stress of public speaking or mental arithmetic. Participants in the ascorbic acid group had lower blood pressure, lower subjective stress response, and faster salivary cortisol recovery. So vitamin C can actually help you deal with psychological stress, which, if there's any theme to the work we've done here on this podcast, it's that psychological stress and mental health play a huge, huge role in regulating your gut-brain axis, and therefore it either causing or exacerbating or influencing your IBS or SIBO symptoms. Yeah. So everybody with tummy problems should probably care about the role of vitamin C in mental health. And then likewise, there was a systematic review and meta-analysis that showed that, with patients with subclinical depression, vitamin C had mood elevating effects. And they looked at a bunch of different trials and they saw that vitamin C significantly improved mood scores in people who had depression, but who had not been prescribed antidepressants. So pretty notable link for mental health and stress management.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. I think again, like vitamin C is a really interesting one because again, I think, I don't know, whenever I think of vitamin C, I think of like, oh, drink your OJ and prevent infections is like the thing that just was drilled in your head as a kid. But there's been some interesting like specific gut related studies with vitamin C. There was one study, and this one was really fascinating just because it compares it to other nutrients. But this study compared various high-dose vitamins and how they affected the microbiome. So in the study, they looked at vitamin A, vitamin C, B2, so riboflavin, D, and E. And they found that vitamin C supplementation yielded the most significant shift on the microbiome compared to the other ones, which again, I think was a surprise to even the researchers. And what they found that it seemed to increase diversity of the microbiome. It increased short chain fatty acids, so it increased butyrate, propionate. And again, like they hypothesized in the article, similar to what we've been talking about before, that the biggest way that it influences the microbiome is by mopping up inflammatory ROS, like reactive oxygen species, like lowering the oxygenation in the gut. So sort of changing the environment, which then allows the microbiome to shift. So it's really interesting. It's really interesting that it had such an extreme effect compared to other nutrients that probably get more press. There was another study too that showed an increase in bifido with vitamin C2, which again, people with IBS tend to have lower bifido levels. So,
I mean, not if you look at the GI map, but
that's true.
Any other unit of measure, and sure.
So yeah, I think again, like you can think of vitamin C. There's a lot of overlap, I think, between like riboflavin, E, and C having like antioxidant type roles in the gut and how that can really help the gut environment shift. But yeah, kind of fascinating. The extent of the effect compared to the other ones.
Yeah, it's interesting that they compared it to other nutrients. And like you said, these other nutrients tend to get more press, especially vitamin D.
Right.
So that is an interesting study that they did. I'll throw this out there too, because you just beautifully covered the microbial side of it. There was a study, let's see, immunomodulatory and antimicrobial effects of vitamin C. And they basically it wasn't in people, like they took samples and then they did it in a petri dish. But when applying vitamin C to duodenal explants derived from patients suffering from celiac disease, a decreased secretion of pro-inflammatory mediators in response to gluten could be assessed when they put vitamin C on the plate. So people who have a lot of food sensitivities, or perhaps people who are celiacs or probable celiac like me, you might get less of a response from eating that food that you're sensitive to if you just have enough vitamin C. Interesting. Similarly, that paper said vitamin C might have an antimicrobial effect against some of our buds: Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Staphylococcus aureus, Enterococcus faecalis, and Helicobacter pylori. Those are some of the favorites that we tend to see people talk about when they get like a GI map or a GI effects or gut zoomer or whatever functional stool test you're on these days. So wouldn't it be nice if you could get rid of the Pseudomonas or the H. pylori, at least in part with the help of vitamin C? Wouldn't that be neato? And then one more, this one, different paper, but they said, although causality has yet to be established, hypothetically poor vitamin C status drives metabolic endotoxemia, and conversely, heightened inflammation due to endotoxemia depletes vitamin C. So, and then importantly, in humans, impaired gut barrier function occurs with scurvy.
Yeah.
So, but what they're describing in that first part is the vitamin C deficiency gives you more of a leaky gut and more endotoxemia, which means that bacterial toxins and metabolites and shrapnel is getting through into your bloodstream and causing you a whole world of hurt. And it's inflammatory. But then the inflammation, you're gonna burn through your vitamin C trying to take care of that inflammation. So the inflammation itself causes a further vitamin C deficiency. Well, now you have more leaky gut and endotoxemia and more inflammation. And like, you could see how it's very easy to snowball out of control here. So yeah, I mean, I think at the bare minimum, people want to shoot for getting like a normal amount of vitamin C, but there might be some people who would really benefit from getting a little bit of a whole food vitamin C supplement like rose hips or camu camu and getting a bit extra to facilitate their healing process.
Yeah. It's a good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
And if I may, I think I just found the perfect closing remarks for this episode.
Okay. Yes. Because I do have to pee. My bladder is pulsating at this point.
Damn it. Okay. Well, I will throw this out there then. I think you will agree with me as the dietitian on staff here at the IBS Freedom Podcast, but I think the biggest plea I can make at the end of this episode is that I hope people, A, care about these nutrients, but also, guys, try to get them through your food. Don't be a lazy bum. Don't just be the person who's like, I take my Centrum vitamin and I'm totally fine now. Like, no, there are so many examples where that probably is not true. So like vitamin C is this complex with many different components to it. And then we humans and our ego and our science suck out the ascorbic acid and then we plop it into a capsule and we say, my work here is done. That is vitamin C, ladies and gents. Right. But like, is it? And similarly, vitamin E in nature, in food, is going to be 4 tocopherols and 4 tocotrienols. And the 8 molecules combined give us what we call vitamin E in food. But when you get vitamin E, quote unquote, from a supplement, it's just alpha tocopherol 99% of the time. And it's like, is that really the same? Is that really adequate? So please, please care about these nutrients, care about all the nutrients, but also do your best to get them from food first and foremost, and really only use supplements and vitamin products on an as needed basis, maybe as like a little bit of an extra insurance policy, but don't be the person who relies on the vitamin supplements and then is wondering why you're not feeling better.
Well, and I think, again, it's sort of a scenario where if you have an outright deficiency, potentially supplementing for a period of time makes sense. But, long-term wise, you want to be getting all these things from food. So I think there's like a time and a place maybe to supplement, but it's not, I think, again, people generally reach for the supplement before trying to figure out how to work it into their diet. And you'd be much better off working it into your diet for a variety of different reasons than reaching for a supplement. And again, I will say too, people that supplement things that they don't need to, that usually backfires too. I don't know how much we've seen it with some of the vitamins, but like the minerals in particular. So like over supplementing iron, over supplementing magnesium, over supplementing zinc seem to have like the opposite effect of helping the gut. A lot of times it leads to more diarrhea and more symptoms and things like that. So again, I think that there is a bit of a Goldilocks situation. So if there is a need to take an iron, by all means take an iron, but monitor it and know that this is sort of like a short-term plan to maybe build levels up. Again, that makes sense to me. But at some point, you have to figure out how to actually get iron into the diet.
Yeah. That's a good way to frame it, is like you could get your levels up a bit. So for example, what I described with migraine patients doing well with higher dose riboflavin, by all means, you could try that and maybe do that for a period of a few months. But in an ideal world, we would get you to a point where you could just maintain that with food.
Right.
The trick is I find a lot of people are very keen to run and reach for the supplements, but then they're not changing their restrictive diet, or rather they're maintaining a restrictive diet, right? It's like, oh, well, I'm just going to stay on this like paleo AIP low FODMAP hybrid because I've been told, or no, even better, AIP low oxalate, low lectin diet because I've been told that all of those foods are evil. And I'm just going to take a vitamin and be done with it. It's like, is that really the same thing?
Right.
It's akin to a vegan who's like, oh, I'll just take an iron supplement, but I'm not going to eat meat again. I don't know. Is that adequate for most people? I don't think so. But point remains, please try to get these things through food. I think you will be rewarded for your efforts if you can do that. It is a process. It's going to take time. You're not going to eat the world's most perfect diet tomorrow, probably. But, make an effort, use vitamins when they're appropriate on an as-needed basis. And hopefully we've given you some usable information here on the IBS Freedom Podcast once again. So until next time, toodaloo.